Welcome back, true believers and spectacular Spidey fans, to another infectious installment of Radioactive Review, in which I fully review, top to bottom, all aspects of each individual Spider-Man game after I complete the Radioactive replay for all of them. And this one is focusing on Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions. And I have to say, this game is incredibly outgoing. That's the biggest thing I have to say about this game, is that it is a one-of-a-kind, outright incredible Spider-Man game. This was the Spider-Man game that really focused on a lot of different Spider-Men for the first time ever in any Spider-Man game, and actually really popularized a lot of these different iterations of Spider-Man, specifically 2099. That version of Spider-Man would not be as popular as he is today without this game's success. Now, before I begin reviewing the game, I want to give a huge shout out to Ricky Franklin, and he is incredible on so many levels. Please go follow him on Instagram and on Twitter. He does graphic designs in an incredible way, and what you're seeing right here is what I've been using in my recent thumbnails for Radioactive Replay. Specifically, what I will be using for The Amazing Spider-Man 1 when I play that game is this new logo that he made for me. He made this for me. It was all him, and it is gorgeous in every single way, shape, and form. So, Ricky, if you are watching, dude, thank you so much. It means everything to me from the bottom of my heart. It's beautiful, and without you, most of these thumbnails wouldn't be possible, so thank you so much. And like I was saying, this game, again, is a very ambitious, really ambitious game at that. Every single thing that we saw in this game, from the worlds, the setting, the story, the fact that the goal for this game to make it feel like it was 4 games in one that Beanox was trying to accomplish in their main story narrative, they totally succeeded in every way possible, and I think the final product that we did get is something that we can never ever experience ever again. Like, this was a once-in-a-lifetime experience for a Spider-Man game. Seeing 4 separate iterations of the character becoming one entity that you can play as Spider-Man, and playing as all these different individuals was a really great experience to play for the first time. This game came out in 2010. I was 12 years old at the time, and I was very starstruck by these new iterations of Spider-Man that I never really noticed that much before, which was Spider-Man Noir and Spider-Man 2099. Now, I did know a little bit about 2099, but not too much about Spider-Man Noir, because at the time, he was a new Spider-Man character, and he really stole the show in this game. And really, to kind of showcase a really interesting part about this game, is that this game is technically Web of Shadows 2. Now, what I mean by that is, when Shaba Games made Web of Shadows, they sadly were shut down by Activision, because Activision loves doing that to all their companies, mainly with Radical Entertainment, the people who made the Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction game. They shut them down after they made Prototype 2 for some reason, and they did the same thing here with Shaba Games. But the cool thing about Shattered Dimensions is that when Shaba Games was on the road to making Web of Shadows 2, they had a concept art for Mysterio. And in Shattered Dimensions, Beanox actually took that same exact concept from Shaba Games and inputted it into this game, which I found really honorable. They weren't stealing it from them. They were doing that as a way to honor Shaba Games and what they did with Web of Shadows, and making Mysterio the main villain of this game, and having the same design that they wanted to use from their Mysterio in Web of Shadows 2, and it didn't happen, so they incorporated it into this Mysterio's design, and that's really cool. That really brings a tear to my eyes, because, again, Web of Shadows is my favorite Spider-Man game, and seeing how Beanox really does pay tribute to that studio, and are really passionate Spider-Man fans as well, means a lot to me. This is, in fact, Beanox's best Spider-Man game. Hands down, this is their best Spider-Man game that they've ever made. And mainly when Shaba Games was trying to make Spider-Man Web of Shadows 2, it was called Spider-Man Classic. But then, like I said, they got shut down, and then we got this game, which was the substitute for that. And we see that with a lot of things, with how the black suit plays in the game, why the black suit is actually in this game, and why Mysterio is the primary villain. But anyways, it was a really cool way for Beanox to basically pay homage to Web of Shadows. And they also wanted to go back to formula, if I might say, to the linear aspect of Spider-Man games. We've already had tons of free-roaming Spider-Man games. We had 4 free-roaming Spider-Man games in a row, with Spider-Man 2, Ultimate Spider-Man, Spider-Man 3, and Web of Shadows. Then, Beanox decided to take a step back from that and say, you know what, we want to go back to the old school days, where Spider-Man was purely a linear, level-based game, like with the old school Neversoft games, and the first movie tie-in game, and they wanted to do that to kind of make it a more smaller scale of a game but also make it more bigger and have it more focused on action instead of the city, which you will free roam in. They want to focus it more on the story's narrative and the action that you can actually experience within each level of the game, and each character that you will meet in each level of the game as well. So, first off, like I said, the story. The story is that Mysterio, one night, goes into the museum in New York City to try and steal this really ancient artifact called the Tablet of Order and Chaos. And it turns out this artifact is so ancient that it actually connects to multiverse dimensions within this universe of Spider-Man. And guess what? Spider-Man accidentally shatters this tablet when he's trying to take out Mysterio, and all of a sudden, Madam Web appears, and she guides you on an epic multiverse quest to try and retrieve each individual piece of the tablet that did in fact break apart when Spider-Man did accidentally punch it. And then we get introduced to the coolest part of this game, which is in fact the cast. And with the cast, we also get this huge variety of worlds. We have the main primary 616 version of Spider-Man, which is the Amazing Spider-Man, which I love that they decided to do that. They just call him the Amazing Spider-Man. It's not 616. It's not any whatever iteration that is, thoroughly included within the Marvel lore. They just said flat, he's the Amazing Spider-Man. So that's why it's like you have the Ultimate Fantastic Four, then you have the Amazing Fantastic Four. That's how I like to call it. And yeah, we have the Amazing Spider-Man, which is the primary Spider-Man. We have Spider-Man Noir, which is a Spider-Man in the 1940s where he got his powers in the past during the Great Depression, and it's a really cool take on Spider-Man. More gritty, more dark, more strategic, more stealthy. Then we have the exact opposite of that with Spider-Man 2099. It's in the far future. You have super fast-paced, out-of-this-world combat, very free-falling action sequences in certain parts of the game. And then we get to my personal favorite, and probably a lot of your favorite dimensions as well, is Ultimate Spider-Man with the black suit. Not only is it awesome, because the black suit plays a big factor in this dimension that you can use in combat and during cool parts of the cutscenes, but also it's because this version of Spider-Man, this Ultimate Universe version of Spider-Man, is the exact same Spider-Man from the Ultimate Spider-Man game in 2005. It's the exact same one. In that game, he was 15 years old as a little teenager. In this game, he's 18 years old, and that's why Josh Keaton voices this Spider-Man in this game instead of Sean Marquette, because he got older. He matured up a bit. He, went through some changes, wink, wink, and it's really more of a mature story with this version of Ultimate Spider-Man, and it's really cool how they implemented that within the game, which also goes a long way in terms of how the game looks. Now, Spider-Man PS4 looks great. Visually and gameplay-wise, it looks great. But this game is the most beautiful Spider-Man game ever. Each individual dimension has a beautifully rendered graphic art style, and the really cool thing here is that when Beanox was making the game, they split up their development team in 4 separate teams, one working on each dimension. So one team fully focused on the Amazing Universe, the other one focused on the Ultimate Universe, the other one's focused on 2099, and so on. So it was really, really cool and a really ambitious development status that they did make for this game, which is really something I've never really seen before for a main development company working on a game this outgoing and ambitious. I know I say that a lot, ambitious, but you have to admit this is a really, really different Spider-Man game. Not anything like we've ever really seen before in terms of the scale and the status of each of these characters and how they made this game with a cel-shaded art style for Ultimate, a noir style for old school 90s and 40s noir films with Noir, a really neo-neon futuristic take on 2099. That was their term, is neo-neon, like new, futuristic, out of this world, like more tech-based, with the graphic art style that 2099 has. Even though that one doesn't look as really, breathtaking as the other ones, it's still a cool art style. And finally is the Amazing Universe. They went straight from the comics. They wanted to rip the pages of the old school Stan Lee, Steve Ditko comics from the 60s and put it into a video game, and that's what they were trying to do with the Amazing Universe, and it looks great. I think my most favorite one, though, is Noir, because of how breathtaking it looks, and it's cool because it changes. From when you're in the shadows, it's more dark, it's black and white, whereas if you're in the light, it's a bit more noir filter, but the filter does change when you're in the shadows to when you're in the light, and it looks fantastic. And to continue with that, we also have the soundtrack. The soundtrack of this game is something that's really, really unique. It's not the best soundtrack in any Spider-Man game, but it's really up there. It is really up there in terms of a great soundtrack, because how each level of the game is tailored to that specific area and boss that you are experiencing within the game. So, where we have the Carnage level, you mainly have to go through a totally, really messed up S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters at the Triskelion base, and the music that plays in the background really fits the dark tone. Like, oh my god, the Triskelion is under attack by Carnage and the symbiote threat. I have to take him out and stop him. And then when the boss battle occurs, it's that same soundtrack, but doubled in terms of epicness and its stakes, because you have to make sure that you take out Carnage before he destroys the entire facility, and it's a really epic battle that we have with that villain, and the soundtrack really does play that in a very fun way. And that goes for all the levels and all the bosses for each of the main incarnations of each dimension in this game. My favorite personal one is the Deadpool soundtrack, because that one it's so memorable, and I hum it every time I'm bored. I can just hum that soundtrack because of how awesome it is. So now we're getting into the main pros that the game does in fact have, everybody. And the very first pro, like I mentioned earlier, is that the wide cast of characters. I said that before. We have 4 unique Spider-Man, we have Madam Web, and we have 3 individual villains for each dimension. Also, plus Mysterio for all the dimensions. So, total of 13 villains for this game. And we also get little tiny cameos with Silver Sable and some henchmen and references to some other heroes like Iron Man, the Fantastic Four. And it's really cool seeing how, again, this was before the whole licensing thing happened where certain characters belong to certain parts of Marvel. This is before all that, so we got tons of references to the bigger scope of the Marvel Universe, and it's a really cool thing to experience that in the game. And with each villain, it's each unique status for all the villains for each dimension. So for the ultimate version of Electro, it's not the one with the green and yellow suit, it is the blue one, like in the Amazing Spider-Man 2 movie, and just from the comics, it's like the blue Electro. And we also have Ultimate Deadpool and Ultimate Carnage, where it's not Cletus Cassidy, it's like a monster that's Ultimate Carnage. So it's really cool how they did, in fact, do their research and make each villain unique in their own respective ways. And it's really cool when you're fighting them in each of the boss fights. Now, to continue, the best part about this game, most likely one of the best parts about it, is in fact the voice acting. We get each iconic voice from Spider-Man's cartoon past incorporated into this game. Neil Patrick Harris voices the Amazing Spider-Man from the new animated series, which is my favorite Spider-Man animated show of all time. We get Christopher Daniel Barnes from the OG 90s cartoon voicing Spider-Man Noir. We get Dan Gilvezan, who voices Spider-Man 2099, who voiced Spider-Man in the old school Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends cartoon. And me personally, I actually really like Dan Gilvezan as Spider-Man 2099. He brings a more humorous tone to him. It's more lighthearted, more witty, and it's really fun. And also, of course, everyone's favorite, Josh Keaton is Ultimate Spider-Man. Gotta save the best for last, of course. And you can't really say anything else about that. It's Josh Keaton as Black Suit Ultimate Spider-Man. How better can that get? And also, besides of those 4 awesome voice actors, we get great other voice actors for all the villains. We get Steve Bloom, we get Tara Strong, and we get a lot of other cool voices in the game for each respective villain, and it's very dynamic. Nolan North is Deadpool. That's a really standout one, and very fun with that whole level, and it's great. Each individual performance from all of the individuals in that game is fantastic, and I think they did an outstanding job for all their respective roles. Now, next up was a new gameplay mechanic that we've never seen before in any Spider-Man game, and Beanox was the first one to do it, is in fact first-person sequences in the game. We see this during the cutscenes and certain cutscenes during the levels, and mainly, which was awesome in my opinion, is the first-person punch-out sequences of gameplay during the boss battles. You can do certain aspects of the boss battles where you can go up close and personal and really take the fight to the bosses and try and punch them out in really virtuous and ferocious gameplay. And what Beanox said is that they wanted to make it personal. They wanted to feel like this whole level, the villain's trying to kill you, trying to make your life a living hell, and you can gain the upper hand during certain parts of the game by punching them in a first-person punch-out sequence of gameplay, which makes it really fun and dynamic for all the players to experience during the levels. And again, I thought it was really unique how they incorporated that into the game. Each time that it happens, I loved it. I didn't hate it at all. I thought it was really cool and very different for a Spider-Man game, and I really appreciate Beanox for doing that. Now, next up is actually level variety. A lot of the levels are really cool in regards to where the setting is. You can fight Deadpool on an oil rig. You fight Sandman in a quarry. You fight Juggernaut in a construction yard. You fight Electro at a power plant. And you fight Vulture, Goblin, and Hammerhead, all located in the 1940s version of New York City. And it's great. And all of the game's graphics really pops in regards to all the levels that you're going at. Each level is very unique and different. and very various in regards to what you can do in each level, whether that's slightly exploring certain levels and certain parts of levels, or just going off and fighting some villains in certain free roam areas, many free roam areas in parts of the levels, and it's really, really cool. Now, next up, obviously, of course, is the bosses. Every single boss fight is epic. There are a few ones that aren't as memorable as the other ones, but that doesn't mean that they're any less epic. Each of the boss fights from the 1940s Noir, Vulture, and Juggernaut, and mainly Carnage, which in my opinion is the best boss fight in the game, is very, very fun. That's the best part about it, is that it is fun. And each of them makes you want to keep going after them, because there's two parts of each boss fight. The main part, you fight them first as their normal villain selves. Then, the final boss fight would be them with the power of this tablet of order and chaos, which gives them extra powers. And it makes the boss fight even more intense, even more extraordinary, and more various. Instead of just doing the same thing over and over again, it actually gives a lot of variety for the player to do and experience when fighting these villains, and it's a really, really cool gameplay mechanic that Beenox implemented within the boss fights. Now, of course, mainly a standout feature of the game is, in fact, the combat. Now, this isn't like Web of Shadows combat, but it is still really cool. And mainly, it's also old school, because it goes back to the old school Neversoft games with Spider-Man PS1 and Spider-Man PS1, 2, Enter Electro, and all that. And it's just your standard press square to punch, triangle to heavy attack, circle to grab, X to jump, and then R1 to fire web shots, which is really cool. And also, my favorite part about the combat is that you can press and hold L2, and you activate this mode called Defensive Stance. And every time you hold it, you become invincible, and not only do you do a really cool Spider-Man pose, and you can actually dodge enemies and bullets in really cool ways and make it that much more dynamic when fighting enemies. And there's also the Web Strike maneuver, which isn't as awesome as it was in Web of Shadows, but it still gets the job done. You can throw enemies on the ground, you can slam them, bounce off them, punch them. Really, really cool ways to incorporate a feature like the Web Strike in the game. And also for each dimension is a different combat style. Amazing is more comic booky, more unrealistic. It has webs. You can use giant web fists, web hammers, web maces to take out your enemies. It's really, really fun. And you also have the 1940s Spider-Man Noir with a bare-knuckle brawling style of combat. That's what Beenox was saying in their developing interviews, is that they wanted to give Noir the most realistic term of combat. He's just straight up punching, kicking, trying to get the job done, not caring how he fights, just really bruiser. He's a big bruiser when fighting, and it's really, really cool how that's incorporated in the game. And next up, obviously, is Spider-Man 2099. It's like the Noir combat up to the next level. It's like that times a million more speed. You can use the charge attack for each dimension in a really unique way, but mainly for 2099's charge attack, you can do like the Flash. You can go from one enemy to another and then take out 5 at once, and you also have heavy attacks. You have combos where you can press 2 buttons at the same time for each dimension, and with Spider-Man 2099, the fast-paced combat really gets the job done. Really quick slashes and claw strikes, and really cool status of Lucha Libre. That's the main style of combat that Spider-Man 2099 uses, is in fact a very futuristic version of Lucha Libre, which is very, very cool to see in the game. And of course, my personal favorite again is Ultimate Spider-Man with the black suit. You have huge ultimate tendrils to get the job done, and you can even use Rage Mode, which is an enhanced version of combat to make all your moves even more bigger, more powerful, more damaging, and more epic looking when fighting bad guys in all the levels, and that really makes your power grow as the Ultimate Spider-Man. And it's really cool because that specific dimension for the Ultimate Spider-Man, the AI for all the villains is different from the other dimensions, because the AI in the Ultimate Dimension makes it so that all the enemies swarm towards you. There will be a huge amount of enemies in all the levels, so that way they can swarm after you, so that way you're forced to use your Web of Shadows-esque tendril attacks and attack all the enemies around you with your symbiote tendrils in a really, really cool way, and that makes it much more fun and more dynamic when you're trying to attack enemies with your symbiote tendrils in different ways. Now, next up is really interesting, is actually the combat and character upgrades that we do have in the game. As you progress through each level, you will gain Spider Essence, which is XP after you take on enemies, you complete challenges, you can get little collectibles in level, and it's really, really cool because all the upgrades are very, very useful. No upgrade is like, oh, that's a useless upgrade. Every upgrade is very, very helpful and impactful when fighting enemies in the level. And also, there's character upgrades, so that way you can upgrade your health, You can upgrade the special abilities for Spider-Man 2099 and Ultimate Spider-Man, and you can also upgrade the amount of experience that you can get when fighting bad guys, so that way you can get more each time you do defeat an individual bad guy. It's really cool, helpful, and it makes you think on deciding what upgrade should I get. Should I get this symbiote attack, or should I get some more health for all my Spideys? So it's a really cool thought process that you have to go through when upgrading all the Spider-Men, which brings me to my last point of the pros for the game, is in fact the challenges. Now the challenges in this game are very, very unique. Each level, you have to do certain aspects during the level to get a challenge, and each time you complete a challenge, you get experience, and that way you can get more upgrades and all that cool stuff, and it's really, really fun, so that way you can go back to each level and do the challenge, and also get some experience points and a trophy, or an achievement, whichever console you're playing it on, and it really makes you want to go back to each level, so that way you have a reason to keep playing the game if you didn't finish the game 100% the first time. And as an honorable mention, again, this isn't really a big pro, but I really like it, is that there is difficulty setting. This game does in fact have a difficulty setting from easy, normal, or hard, and I just really appreciate that, because I do like a challenge. I like facing a hard challenge within a Spider-Man game. That way I can play it more and play it longer and have it actually make it so that it is a skillful challenge to play through, and the fact that there is a difficulty setting is very, very helpful. And also, the fact that there is a difficulty setting, if you complete a level, say, on easy mode, you're only going to get some of the awards. If you do, in fact, complete a level in hard mode, you're going to get some trophies, you're going to get some statues that you can go through, concept art, bios for each character in the extras menu of the game, and it really, really makes that if you play it through normal the first time and you go back the second time on hard mode, then it gives you a reason to keep playing the game on different difficulties, which is really, really cool. And obviously the best moment of the game, like I said earlier, is all the boss fights, but for me, the standout boss fight was in fact the Carnage boss fight. Everything about it, blown away. It's like the Carnage fight that we did not get in Ultimate Spider-Man, where you fight Carnage as Venom. It's like that same thing here, except you're facing him as Black Suit Spider-Man at the S.H.I.E.L.D. Triskelion headquarters, and it's really, really cool. It was a really awesome standout boss fight in that game. Now, obviously, we're going to get to the cons, and it's awesome because I only have 2 cons for this whole game. The first con is actually the lack of replayability. Once you do in fact beat the challenges, you beat the game on hard mode, you do everything, that's it. You can't do anything else. There's no free roaming or anything. It's just a level-based game. There's only 13 levels, so there's only a little bit of variety there if you already did in fact beat the game. And once you defeat everything and 100% the game, there's not really a lot much to do in regards to playing the game. You can play it for fun, but in regards to doing a lot of stuff afterwards, not that much. Which also goes with the second reason is fact this is a linear game. This isn't a free roaming game. There's no New York City to explore. This is a level-based game, and that can only go so far for a Spider-Man game. If it is level-based, it'll probably be fun like the old school Neversoft games, but once you do in fact beat it, that's it. Nothing really else to do. It's a one-and-done game, but it is a really awesome one-and-done game at that. And the worst part of the game, in my opinion, is in fact the Doc Ock level. The Doc Ock level in the game is 100% indoors in the scientific laboratory, and the boss fight itself is not that fun. It's a little bit boring, and it's just the least interesting boss fight of the game. It's still pretty fun, but not as fun as all the other levels were. So, everybody, that is my Radioactive review for Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, and overall, while this game is a total blast, the fact that it is a linear-based game, and once you do 100% the game, there's nothing else to do, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10, and in fact, this is my 4th favorite Spider-Man game. My top 5 Spider-Man games, this is my 4th favorite one, and this isn't to say that this game is bad in any regards. This is one of the most unique and diverse Spider-Man games out there that you'll ever play. You'll experience great combat, fun levels, great dialogue from the cast of characters, and very, very awesome boss fights overall. And this game will totally deliver you a extremely unparalleled adventure for you to experience and enjoy, and it's just a really, really fun time. Now, that's why I give it an 8 out of 10. Once again, I don't like giving half scores because I like giving purely solid scores, so that's why I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. But anyways, everybody, that is it for my Radioactive review for Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions. I hope you enjoyed it. And also, this is it, everybody. We're finally done with these 2 Radioactive reviews because I did complete the Radioactive replays for this game. So now, I'm finally going to do the Amazing Spider-Man 1 Radioactive replay very soon. Part 1 will be out soon. I will not live stream it, sadly, like I did mention at the end of my Shattered Dimensions Radioactive replay. I will, in fact, do a standard playthrough of the game, but there is something really cool that I will mention once I do start playing the game, and make sure to look forward to that in the future. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, everybody. Stay spectacular, Spidey fans. Enjoy this little sneak peek of me playing the Amazing Spider-Man 1 Radioactive replay. Peace out.